UFC Vegas 88 just came to a close, and today, guys, I'm going to give my reaction to the majority of the fights on the card because, of course, sometimes fights just aren't typically worth talking about. There were some fights that nothing really happened, so I'm going to skip those, but if you're interested in hearing my take on any particular fight, jump to the timestamps. They'll be in the description, pinned comment down below. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle. I'm your guy with too many YouTube channels. Let's start off with this horrible card with the betting recap. So guys, of course, this is a really rough one, and there was a lot of upsets this time around. There was a lot of upsets. So of course, what I was worried about, the biggest thing that happened was Kennedy Nzechukwu ended up losing. I still ended up putting a quarter of a unit on him, well, in a parlay with Jafel Filho, which sucks because Jafel looked so good, man. He looked so good, and I was so worried because I don't think Kennedy's good. I don't. But at the end of the day, Ovince St. Preux came in and he actually didn't do nothing this time around. Usually he stands there at, is he 40, 41 years old at this point? I thought Kennedy would be able to get around him, but that was a big upset. And I actually did see that one coming. That's something that I did mention. Of course, the only one that really worked out at really good odds was Josiane Nunes versus Chelsea Chandler going over 2.5 rounds. If you guys know me, I am not too big of a fan on 2.5 rounds, but this was just about a plus money, so that was really nice. And of course, Pannie Kianzad versus Macy Chiasson going over 1.5 rounds, killed that. And the worst one was Charlampos Grigorou to win. I'm very disappointed in him, man. I'm very disappointed in him because he was a huge prospect coming in. I've been watching him even before he came to the UFC, and he showed to have some durability issues. He showed to, I don't know if the moment caught up to him, but that didn't seem like the same fighter that we typically have seen from him. But you know what? Some of these guys, I don't want to say, I guess you could say fraud check, but it's really weird with some of these guys. And of course, the killer was Tuivasa. Tuivasa, I got so worried in the media day, and I spoke about this in a video. I got so worried about Tuivasa after the media day because he showed up, looked like he didn't care. He was done with training, didn't want to be part of this anymore, and I was like, oh, God. But then, of course, Marcin Tybura being Marcin Tybura, still didn't think that was that great, and Tuivasa looked good at the beginning, but Marcin Tybura ended up getting the takedown and he looked a little bit more vicious than usual, I will say. So, Tuivasa's done, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. Oh, man, this was a rough one for a lot of people, eh? But you know what? Things like this happen. We're going to take a look at the next card, and we are going to do much better with much safer. At this point, I feel like I'm done with people like Charlampos. These guys that are coming to the UFC, these guys that we haven't seen enough of, no matter how promising they look, they will need to, really stand out, because you even have guys like Danny Silva. Danny Silva didn't look like the killer he was, right? And the reality is, the majority of these guys, unless they're coming from, maybe LFA, if they're coming from, I would say honestly LFA, but maybe that's because I watch it a lot more. But the talent level over there is really good. You can't trust these guys. There's been too many upsets. There's been people in here like Chad Anglier with the UFC experience, and that matters so much. So we'll keep that in mind moving forward. So regardless, very disappointed with this card, but hey, you know what? They're bound to happen at some point. Regardless, we will do much better. We'll do much safer. I'm ready. Now let's dive into the first fight, Thiago Moises versus Mitch Ramirez. This was a great showing for Thiago Moises, and just like I was talking about the last segment, if you guys happen to skip that part, I have been now worrying. I'm done trusting these guys coming to the UFC no matter how good they look, because Mitch Ramirez looked very promising. Very promising coming to the UFC, and I still thought that Thiago Moises would be too much for him, especially coming in against a guy like Thiago Moises, but man, he did a lot of damage to the leg kicks. And you know what I love about Thiago Moises? You know what I loved what he did? After he got the knockdown with the leg kicks, he kept firing those leg kicks. No break, no, okay, time to get up. He just kept firing and firing. Did a lot of damage. He showed that he still has an all-round game in mixed martial arts. This guy is a very underrated fighter and had a fantastic performance. Then we move on to Jaqueline Amorim versus Cory McKenna, and this one was a little bit surprising to me. We all know that Jaqueline has a very good BJJ game, especially for that division, but I thought Cory McKenna actually, especially coming from Team Alpha Male, I thought she would come in and she would be able to defend anything that Jaqueline Amorim would have thrown her way, but the length seemed to get to her. She pulled guard, which you don't see too often in the UFC, and it actually ended up working out for her. Cory McKenna tapped 2 times before the ref actually stopped it, so you can even look at it as Jaqueline submitted her 2 or 3 times, which was crazy. But yeah, I thought Cory McKenna was a little bit better than, well, I mean, not better, but I thought that this would be a little bit more of a closer contest than it proved to be. And this is exactly what I was talking about, like Danny Silva taking on Josh Culibao. Danny Silva, he didn't look like the killer that he was, but Josh Culibao was a pretty good fighter, he is a very good fighter. He's a little bit underrated in my opinion, but Danny Silva got the win. I thought it was a pretty close fight, but I personally gave it to Josh Culibao. Danny Silva looked very good with his aggression. The problem being he gets caught, and one day that chin's going to crack. These guys can't always rely on the chin, especially when they're so young in their career, right? That'll catch up to them real quick, but he's a very fun fighter to watch. He proved that coming to the UFC. I was excited to see him fight, and he lived up to the hype for me. I'm excited to watch Danny Silva moving forward. Moving on, we have Gerald Meerschaert versus Bryan Barberena. This one went exactly as expected. I threw Gerald Meerschaert, into a parlay. Very sad to see that break because of not him, and I thought about betting on him in particular by submission, and that's exactly what happened. But I don't like getting that specific with my bets, but man, I could just see it coming from Bryan Barberena, man. He shows up, he's not in shape. I don't know how he's in the UFC, to be honest with you. No disrespect to Bryan Barberena, but he's just not the athlete that some of these guys are. Regardless, I'm a big fan of GM3. I'm happy to see him get the win. Unfortunately, I think in this point in his career, Gerald Meerschaert is finally, his age is catching up to him now. His striking looked very, very slow. But hey, with a guy who's that age competing at the level that he's at, his body going through a lot, man, I'm very happy to see him get the win. I love GM3. Now we have Christian Rodriguez versus Isaac Dulgarian. Guys, we see the term robbery thrown around a lot in this sport, but this was a really, really bad one. This was a horrible robbery. First round, 10-8, Isaac Dulgarian. And I thought my scorecard here, I thought that it was this is the way it should be. Usually I'm like, oh, okay, well, maybe different people think different things, but no, I think this is the proper way to score it. 10-8, Isaac Dulgarian in the first round. Round 2, 10-9 Dulgarian. Round 3, 10-8 for Rodriguez. I don't see how anybody could see that any other way. And I just feel bad for Isaac Dulgarian. But what do we learn from him? Man, throughout the fight, I was thinking, wow, this guy could be the real deal. We still need to see some more striking from him, of course, but I was worried about his cardio, especially with how explosive he is, how controlling he is, how strong he is, right? He ended up going rounds 1 and 2, absolutely no problem. Then came out in round 3, just 100% gassed. I was like, oh, and I can't believe Christian Rodriguez didn't finish him. I can't believe it, but he made a stupid point in the fight where you could tell that he's like, I want to submit this guy, instead of just throwing a few hammer fists. He could have won this fight, but man, that was an absolutely horrible robbery, and I feel horrible for Isaac Dulgarian. Moving on, we have Ovince St. Preux versus Kennedy Nzechukwu. I was worried about this, but I was honestly more worried about Ovince just catching Kennedy and knocking him out, but I was not confident in Kennedy Nzechukwu. I threw a bet on him either way because Ovince hasn't done anything recently in the past few years, and he's old now, but man, how bad is Kennedy Nzechukwu really? Sometimes he just comes in and he doesn't show. And he didn't show. Ovince St. Preux should not be beating you. That's absolutely crazy. And I thought the fight was really, really close. It could have been a toss-up. So I'm not mad about Ovince getting the win. It's just absolutely insane that Kennedy was that big of a favorite. In my opinion, I never thought he was that good. Moving on to the co-main event, we have Bryan Battle versus Ange Loosa. And wow, okay. Bryan Battle, I wouldn't say he was putting on a clinic, but to use Bryan Battle's words, he was kind of beating him pretty bad. Bryan Battle was more active. He was throwing the harder shots. He was landing more, and he was just winning. Ange Loosa wasn't getting absolutely destroyed. And honestly, there was a lot of time for him to come back and win the fight. But then, of course, the accidental eye poke came in. Ange Loosa, and I have trouble talking about this because Bryan Battle should not have eye poked, okay? But at the end of the day, Loosa was fine. Loosa was fine because he said, I can't see. They got the fight called off because he was losing, and then all of a sudden, he's looking perfectly fine. So, and a lot of people have been talking about how, what a poor sport Bryan Battle is. I wish people did this more often. I wish more people called people out when they did this. I've never understood how, I don't know if there was beef here, but to do something like that, in my opinion, is just a little bit of a weasel move. It's funny that Ange Loosa had Sterling in the corner, and then he started pulling a little bit of a Sterling there, right? But yeah, there's no there's nothing you can do. Let's run it back again. I like the fact that Bryan Battle spoke up. I like the fact that Bryan Battle called him out for what he was doing. And in my opinion, it's pretty obvious. pretty obvious. And Angelusa was acting really tough after that, which is unfortunate because Lusa is a pretty good fighter in my opinion, but this like put a little bit of stain on him in my opinion. So Bryan Battle, he still looked really good. I can't wait to see him fight again. He's always fun to watch. Moving on to the main event, we have Marcin Tybura taking on Tai Tuivasa. This was incredibly disappointing to me. I was very confident in Tai Tuivasa to get the job done, and it makes me a little bit sad, man, because I do like Tai Tuivasa. I'm a big fan of him, but I was so worried in fight week for this media day, him coming in and talking about how much he hates training and how much he's done with fight camps and how much he just wants to get the fight over with. Like, that really, really made me worry, and in hindsight, I should have cashed out my bet. I should have, because I threw a whole unit on Tai Tuivasa. That was my only unit that I threw on that night. I was just confident that he'd get the job done against Tybura. I don't think Tybura is that good. But hey, Tybura survived. He got the takedown. He beat up Tai Tuivasa. The fight should have been stopped so much sooner than it was, but it's unfortunate, man, because, again, I do like Tai Tuivasa, but you can't show up and compete at the top of the division with the way that he looks. I can't believe that at one point he was, what, number 3 in the world? That heavyweight division's so weak. It's like the WMMA bantamweight division. It's crazy to me, but I feel bad for him. He looked so broken. Unfortunately, he might have to worry about getting cut at this point, but I don't think he will because he still gets a lot of attention. I like Tai, man. I like Tai. And I just want to say for those of you who are part of the membership, I really appreciate your support. I know these weeks are really bound to happen, but it really, I care a lot about this, especially because we have people throwing their hard-earned money at a membership, and it kind of breaks my heart. Like, I always say, bet with money you're willing to lose. I do that personally, but it still sucks if you're paying for something and then you get advice like this. So I sincerely apologize for that. We will do better. I will be safer. I've officially learned my lesson. Unless I'm feeling really good about somebody coming and making their UFC debut, I'm done. There's been too many upsets. We're going to stick with fighters that we know what they're all about. We're going to lean on the safer side. Might go back to round lines. I don't know. I just never want something like this to happen again. I never want something like this to happen again, but it will happen again. Of course, like, you can never have a perfect, like, whole situation like this, right? You can never have perfect bets all the time. So again, my apologies. I really appreciate all of your support, but we will work a lot harder. We will do better. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Check out the video on screen right now. I will see you there or in the next video, guys. Take care.